It was a manic Monday for the Oklahoma Sooners. We've got quarterback transfer portal news to talk about and coaching hires on the defensive side of the football as well. Coming up on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Sooners Nation, and welcome to the Locked On Sooners podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Sonos. Experience the game like never before with Sonos Arc, the premium smart soundbar for TV, movies, music, gaming, and more. Visit Sonos.com to learn more. Thank you for joining me. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams, and you can read my work covering the Oklahoma Sooners over at the Sooners Wire at usatoday.com. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Sooners and on Facebook, Locked On Sooners. And thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. We've got some crazy transfer portal quarterback stuff to talk about on today's episode and some coaching hires as well that we'll get to later in the show. But first of all, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, and that's Caleb Williams has entered his name into the transfer portal. Yes, USC fans who've been listening to the show, you were right. He is entering the transfer portal. You're not necessarily right yet that he's going to USC, but I got to give you some credit there. I know, listen, if you have listened to this show for much of the last year and a half that I've been hosting it, you know that I'm more of an optimistic sports fan. I kind of see the best possible outcome generally for my sports teams. Sometimes that bites me in the butt because it leads to a little bit of naivety where, as much as I wanted to believe that Caleb Williams wants to stay in Oklahoma, the reality is he committed to play for Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley is no longer there. I said on Friday's show that my confidence was waning in Caleb Williams' commitment to the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, entering the transfer portal doesn't necessarily mean that he is leaving. It does mean that he's going to explore some options out there. And if he finds a better situation for him and his future pro prospects, then maybe he's going to go that way. In a statement that he released on Twitter earlier today on Monday afternoon, he said that he's looking for something that's going to prepare him for the next level. And I get that. That's a prime thing. That's a very important thing for quarterbacks in college, especially the ones that are the more talented ones, the ones that are going to be the Heisman favorites. That makes sense, and it's an important aspect of where they want to play football. And part of the reason he wanted to go to Oklahoma is because he thought it was going to get him to the next level. There's a lot of examples of Oklahoma sending quarterbacks to the next level. You've got Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Sam Bradford, Baker Mayfield, all guys that played at the next level. Landry Jones, even though he was never really a starter, had a long career as a backup quarterback in the NFL. And so there's a long history of Oklahoma sending quarterbacks to the NFL. While Lincoln Riley was a big part of that, that stretched to before Lincoln Riley. You even saw Trevor Knight get some snaps at times as a backup, at least in the preseason. He may never have landed anywhere, but I think he was drafted, if I remember right. But so this is not to say that, Caleb Williams is wrong for entering the transfer portal. He has every right to explore his options, just like Joe Castiglione and Brent Venables said in their joint statement from the university Twitter account today. He does have every right to pursue other options because the situation changed. The dynamic changed at Oklahoma, and he has an opportunity to explore other situations and other possibilities. I get that he will probably look at USC, as much as I hate that. I was talking to my wife earlier today, and I said, if there's one place that I don't want him to end up, it's at USC, because I just feel like that would just be the straw that broke the camel's back. At the same time, I would hate for him to be at Texas too, although I think that that's a lot less likely. I think it's just one of those situations where it's like all of this is transpiring because of the coaching change that occurred a month ago. And while we're all happy that Brent Venables is the head coach, we all are excited for the future, and we're looking forward to what he's going to do on the defensive side of the football. There's definitely been a ripple effect that's occurred because of Lincoln Riley's departure, and Caleb Williams is just another kind of wave in that ripple that has happened. I mean, he may or may not come back. he's leaving the possibility open. But I think, the other day on Friday, I said my confidence level that he was going to be back was like 60-40. I probably would put it like 25% now, that of my confidence level that he's going to come back, just because like if you're entering the transfer portal, if you're looking at other options, it means you're not necessarily happy with what you've got. Like my a buddy of mine, he said it really, really well. He's like, you don't, if you're in a happy marriage, you don't go looking for other options. And if Caleb Williams was really happy at Oklahoma and wanted to stay there, then there wouldn't be anything else to look at. But I mean, this is kind of the state that we're in college football free agency now. You know, there's a lot of factors that are at play. There's, playing time, there's talent level that he's going to be playing with. I don't know if he really mentioned contending for a national championship as one of his priorities. Like, that's interesting to me. So like he could end up going to a place like USC, who's not going to contend for a national championship, but it could help raise his profile as it pertains to the NFL draft. He could end up going to a place like a North Carolina. There's stuff floating around on the internet that his girlfriend goes to North Carolina. And so I, for one, know that that women can be a very powerful motivator on where you end up living your life. I'm a Texas guy. I lived in Texas. I live in California. My family, we moved to Texas when I was 14. Lived in Texas for 12 years after that. But my wife, who is an OU grad and was living in Oklahoma, got her first family practice job in a rural town in Oklahoma. And I told her, I said, wherever you end up, I'll move there, because my job was a lot more transferable. So I moved there, and the rest is history. I've lived in Oklahoma for probably much of the last 10, 11 years. The only time I really haven't been living in Oklahoma was about a year that I lived in Texas, year and a half that I lived in Texas, before about 4 years living in Ethiopia, 5 years living in Ethiopia. So there's a lot of motivating factors that are going to motivate a 20-year-old kid, and it's understandable. Like, hey, if my girlfriend was living on the East Coast in North Carolina, I'd have a hard time saying I wouldn't want to move out there too. If my wife was out there, that's probably where I'd want to be too. So love is a very powerful motivator, and if that's where his heart leads him, so be it. That's where his heart leads him. So, it's one of those things. Like, I know that there are going to be a lot of Oklahoma Sooner fans that are angry and upset about this, but it's just part of the reality of where college football is in this day and age. Is somebody who's happy today, they're gone tomorrow. Someone who's with your team today, they're gone. And I think it's something that the NCAA is going to have to start looking at, with NIL becoming a much more prominent fixture in college sports. How is that affecting the transfer portal and recruiting? And what kind of commitments can schools begin holding these players to? Like, yes, there's going to be some free movement in the transfer portal, but with these commitments, there has to be at least a term length, like a term limit that goes into it. And I think the same should be said for coaches. Like, if you're a coach that's under contract with a school or a team, like, you got to be committed to it for a certain length of time. I don't like the fact that coaches can up and just move in the middle of a contract with no penalty. Back in the day when players would have to sit out a year to transfer, coaches could just up and move without having to sit out at all. Now the transfer portal is kind of even things out a little bit, but still the coaches can move freely, especially head coaches. We've seen tons of turnover at head coaching positions this year with Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly and Mario Cristobal. And so, yeah, it's just a weird dynamic that college football is in right now. And I mean, that's not even talking about the state of the bowl system and the college football playoff system, but just the transfer portal and the NIL situation has just got things kind of all wacky right now. And I think schools are still trying to figure out where they fall in all of it and how to manage and utilize all of it to their advantage. And it's going to be really fascinating to see where Caleb Williams lands. Obviously, USC is going to be one of the favorites. Apparently, UCLA has already reached out, and Caleb Williams has expressed some reciprocal interest, according to a report. I already talked about UNC being in play. Hey, Georgia could also be a possible destination. We know that Alabama, Ohio State are probably off the table because they got Bryce Young at Alabama, CJ Stroud at Ohio State. Notre Dame could be one of those situations. Although I get the feeling that he'd probably want to play somewhere south of the Mason-Dixon line a little bit, just a little bit more warm weather where offenses can be a little bit more wide open. But who knows? I mean, only Caleb Williams and his family know where he's going to end up. It still could be at Oklahoma, though. Like I said, my confidence level in that has waned quite a bit. But on the other side of the break, let's talk about the newest addition to the Oklahoma Sooners quarterback room, Dillon Gabriel. We'll talk about that after I tell you about Get Upside. My listeners are making up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time they fill up using the Get Upside app. Just download the Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play Store right now. Use promo code SCORE and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use promo code SCORE to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a month in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back gets added right to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code SCORE to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. That's promo code SCORE. I also want to talk to you about BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the bowls and the NFL playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. So head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. And back here on Locked On Sooners, we're going to talk about the quarterback addition to the transfer portal that the Oklahoma Sooners made on Monday evening. Not long after Caleb Williams made his decision to enter the transfer portal, former UCF quarterback Dillon Gabriel announced that he was committed to the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, Gabriel had previously committed to the UCLA Bruins after leaving the Golden Knights, and that was just a couple weeks ago. Now Gabriel will be with the Oklahoma Sooners, regardless of what happens with Caleb Williams. He's expected to be in Norman this spring. And I think that's a really good addition for the Oklahoma Sooners. This is a guy that averaged 300 yards passing per game for the Golden Knights over 26 starts. Now, he only played 3 games in 2021 due to a shoulder injury. He broke his left clavicle for the Knights in the 3rd game of the season. That's on his throwing shoulder. He's a lefty. And so that definitely is something to be watching. Just based on pictures and images, he's going to be healthy for the spring practice, spring game 2021 season, or sorry, 2022 season. It's 2022 now. Happy New Year, everybody! But yeah, Dillon Gabriel, that's a great addition in the portal. If you look at the transfer quarterback portal rankings, he probably usually ranks around 3rd or 4th behind Spencer Rattler, and then Caleb Williams, obviously in the portal is a significant name. It's a prominent name in the transfer portal now. But even so, like, this is a guy that's familiar with Jeff Lebby, had a great season for him in his freshman year under Lebby. And the familiarity and the relationship that Lebby and Gabriel have, I think will bode very, very well for the Oklahoma Sooners. I think this is a guy that's going to be able to come in and not necessarily have the same production and same level of effectiveness as Caleb Williams, but he's going to be somebody who's going to be able to run a controlled offense and throw the ball really, really well. I mean, UCF's offenses were really good when Gabriel was the quarterback. And so I fully expect him to be really good for the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, that's obviously assuming that Caleb Williams is gone. Now, if Caleb Williams comes back, you'll have quite the quarterback competition, though I assume that Caleb Williams will win that quarterback battle for the Sooners. But it does create a very interesting dynamic that if Williams does decide to stay, then you've got a guy like Gabriel that can help Williams acclimate to the offense. So, when they're not practicing, they don't have as much time in the film room, in the quarterback room with Jeff Lebby, that Gabriel can kind of be the unofficial coach and the unofficial coordinator or quarterbacks coach for Caleb Williams and help him get a read on what the offense is like. and understand of how Jeff Lebby likes to run the offense. I do think, getting a guy like Gabriel brings back maybe a Marvin Mims. I think it helps to keep a guy like that in play. Theo Weiss has already returned. So if you can keep those two guys as your starting wide receivers, I think that's huge for this offense moving forward, because you got a guy like Gabriel who can get the ball downfield. He's a really good deep ball passer. Go look at Pro Football Focus grades, and he is one of the better deep ball passers in college football. And I think that's something that you really look forward to. Now, they'll have to figure out how to keep that a viable option, because we saw teams take that away this year with whether it was Spencer Rattler or Caleb Williams throwing the football. Teams were able to take away the deep passing game on a regular basis. But if they're able to figure out a way to keep that opened up as an option in the passing attack, then I think Dillon Gabriel is going to be able to take advantage of a lot of Big 12 defenses. Now, we've seen the Big 12 has really improved on the defensive side of the ball, whether it's Oklahoma State or Baylor or Iowa State. Shoot, even Kansas got better defensively this year. We know that Texas is going to rebound. They're not going to be a 5-7 team again next year. And so that's something that Lebby and Gabriel will have to figure out, is how are teams trying to take away a guy like Marvin Mims, who, for all intents and purposes, should have had a 1,000-yard receiving season this year. But for some reason, Lincoln Riley just couldn't figure out how to get him the ball unless it was on a 40-yard target, which is one of the failures of Lincoln Riley's tenure, is his inability to get Marvin Mims the football this year. I mean, teams weren't triple teaming this guy, but he didn't lead the team in receptions. It's kind of a travesty. This is your best wide receiver, and you can't figure out how to get him the football. So hopefully, like, Jeff Lebby brings in some more of the kind of short to intermediate passing offense. You kind of go back to Baylor, though, and he does run a lot of vertical stuff. That's what RG3 was successful in. That's kind of the Art Briles offense, is a lot of verts. And it's very successful. At the same time, you've got to be really good on the ground. And that's where Ole Miss was really good, is able to use the ground game to open up the deep passing game, use the short to intermediate stuff to help open up the deep passing game. And if they're able to do that, Dillon Gabriel will be successful. I think the guy, you look all over social media, and the guy's getting rave reviews from players, fans, the current players, former players. Everybody is excited about this addition. And whether Caleb Williams is around or not, Dillon Gabriel has an opportunity to be at least an elite backup for this season and next. He's going to have 3 years of eligibility because of the COVID year, and then he's probably going to get an injury waiver from 2021 that gives him an extra year of eligibility. So even if Caleb Williams sticks around for 2 more years, then you're going to get Dillon Gabriel the year after that, possibly. This is all theoretically. And if they do get him on the field, at whatever point they get him on the field, they're going to get a really, really good quarterback. I'm not going to sit here and say he's as good as Caleb Williams or he's better than Caleb Williams, but I think that he's going to be capable enough. He's going to be good enough for this offense to stay afloat and contend and get this team back into the Big 12 championship picture, the college football playoff picture, if they're able to figure out some things on the defensive side of the football, because that's going to be one of the big questions going into this offseason, is what they do on that side of the ball. But coming up next, let's talk about a couple coaching hires that the Oklahoma Sooners made on Monday as well. This is kind of the story that kind of fell to the wayside a little bit with the quarterback transfer news. But we'll talk about that after I tell you about NetSuite. This is it, the putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software? To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. With visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, planning, and budgeting, and more, NetSuite is everything you need to grow in all in one place. With NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time while staying well ahead of your competition. 93% of surveyed businesses increase their visibility and control after upgrading to NetSuite. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite. And for the new year, NetSuite has a new financing program for those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/locked. So head to netsuite.com/locked for the special one-of-a-kind financing offer on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. That's netsuite.com/locked. All right. The Oklahoma Sooners continue to fill out their defensive assistant coaching staff. on Monday with two new hires. You got Todd Bates, the defensive tackles coach from the Clemson Tigers, who will be the defensive tackles coach, but also gets a bit of a promotion to co-defensive coordinator along with Ted Roof for the Oklahoma Sooners. And then you have Jay Valai, the defensive backs coach. He's going to be the cornerbacks coach, rather, for the Oklahoma Sooners. Most recently, he was with the Alabama Crimson Tide. First, let's talk about Todd Bates. This is a guy with some legit bona fides. He's got defensive starters in the NFL. Christian Wilkins, Dexter Lawrence, Clelin Ferrell. These guys are legit players. You look at Wilkins and Lawrence in particular, and those guys are having really good careers so far. They're solid NFL players, and they were great. I mean, they were All-American players at Clemson, and big parts of why the Tigers were able to win national championships. And so getting a guy like that who's able to recruit and develop defensive tackles is going to be huge for the Oklahoma Sooners, because we know that Perrion Winfrey is gone. You've got some young guys in Isaiah Coe and Joshua Ellison and Jordan Kelly that you like and you hope that can develop. You got some guys coming in, Ahmad Moten and Alton Tarber, that you really like and you think could be really disruptive players on the interior. And you've still got a guy like a Jalen Redmond, who has had some really good seasons for the Oklahoma Sooners so far, was a bit injury plagued in 2021, but still has a ton of potential. A guy that could be one of the best defensive tackles that Oklahoma has ever had because of his ability to penetrate, his pass rush ability, and his ability to play the run. He's just a really, really good player. He just hasn't really put it all together just yet. Led the Oklahoma Sooners in sacks just a couple years ago. And so I'm very high on Jalen Redmond, as most people are. That's not a hot take at all. But getting a guy that maybe could help develop him and take him to the next level would be huge. And then you look at a guy like Jay Valai. Now, this one is a little bit more interesting to me because it kind of runs counterintuitive to who Brent Venables is, in that Brent Venables has had like 3 coaching jobs in his entire career, now 4, but he's only been 3 places. He was at Kansas State under Bill Snyder. Then he was at Oklahoma under Bob Stoops. Then he was at Clemson under Dabo Swinney. And now he's back at Oklahoma as the head coach. Well, you look at a guy like Jay Valai, and just in the last year, he's had 4 jobs. So he was at the end of the 2020 season, he was the cornerbacks coach at Texas. Left there, went to the Houston Cougars. So Texas made their big coaching change, moved on from Tom Herman, which meant a lot of the coaching staff wasn't retained. So he went on to Houston, wasn't there but like 12 days, and then went to the Philadelphia Eagles, wasn't there but like 10 or 11 days, and then ended up at Alabama, was at Alabama for just a year. Prior to his stint at Texas, he was he'd been at Rutgers. He's been in the NFL with the Kansas City Chiefs. He'd been, there was one other place he'd been at Georgia for a couple years as a quality control assistant. And so like he's been a lot of different places in a really short period of time. He kind of has my moving track record where we've only lived places like 2 years in the same house, as much as 2 years at any spot over the last 10 years. So can't really speak. I'm not going to judge too much, but it is interesting that he hasn't been able to latch on somewhere in his time yet. Now, hopefully this is the place that happens. He's a very, very well-respected name in college football. A lot of people think he's a great recruiter. Wasn't able to land some guys in this latest cycle, but that he was in competition with, like Bomani Jackson, who ended up going to USC instead of Alabama. So it'll be interesting to see how that one turns out. I'm not going to completely poo-poo it because, we look at a guy like Brent Venables, and every single hire he's made has been one that's been a grand slam. It's gotten rave reviews. And Jay Valai, people talk about him and people love him. And so I'm not going to sit here and say it's not a good hire, because most people you look at and everybody loves this hire. But it's something that you definitely look at and you do have a few questions about, because he hasn't been in one place for very long. He hasn't been able to get a recruiting class, get them in the program, develop them, and either get them to the NFL or get them graduated. And so like what's the track record really like? He's had some secondaries that played good football, whether it was the Kansas City Chiefs, whether it was the Georgia Bulldogs. He was with them in 2017 when they beat the Oklahoma Sooners. And so I do wonder, like, what's his ability to land recruits, develop them into potential pros or guys that end up being 2-3 year starters before they graduate. That's going to be the thing to watch, because you do have some really highly thought of cornerbacks and coming into the program this next year. What's he going to do with them? Is he going to be able to take a guy like Woody Washington and DJ Graham and help them reach the next level? A guy like Latrell McCutcheon, is he going to help develop him to be a better player than he already is? It remains to be seen. But again, like I said, Brent Venables, he's done a great job putting this staff together. He's had a vision for this staff, and I think it's going to be a staff that does really, really well, and it's going to be a group that pays off with an improved Oklahoma Sooners defense down the road. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thank you so much for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Again, you can go to YouTube, subscribe to the show over there, give us a like, leave us a comment in the comment section, and hit the notification bell to be reminded when there are new episodes. Go subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on every podcast platform. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Sooners and on Facebook, Locked On Sooners Podcast. And you can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. Also go to the Sooners Wire to read some of my work over there. But until tomorrow, I'm John Williams. Boomer Sooner.